Hello everyone, and thank you for checking out my first of what I hope to be many tutorial videos on front-end web design and development. A little background on me. My name is Jesse and I work as a senior front-end web designer and developer. I've worked on major university website overhauls, from moving them into web content management systems to making them 100% mobile responsive. I've taught introductory web design to undergraduate students at the college level, and I'm always interested in learning the latest and greatest web technology myself. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to create your very first web page. And over the course of these videos, I'm going to show you how to create your very own website. No longer does it have to be this mystical thing that just appears in your web browser. I'm going to help explain it all to you, and who knows, you may even have your own website up and running in no time. Let's get started by creating our very first web page. And in order to do that, what we need is some sort of text editor. Now I'm using OS X here on my Mac. And OS X does come with a text editor. It is called TextEdit, which I've got right here. But TextEdit is not really geared towards coding. So I'm going to rule this out as an option to use. Now I could use it, but again, it's not very friendly when it comes to, actual coding. Another example of a text editor that I have here is Wrangler. This is another free text editor. It's available on the web. But again, it's not really something that I want to use for coding because there's far better options out there. So the application that I'm going to use is called Komodo Edit 9. And this is a free cross-platform application. And this is just saying that the project that I had used previously is no longer exists, which is fine. But Komodo Edit 9 is a cross-platform application that's available on Windows, Mac, as well as Linux. If you are using a Windows machine and you don't want to download Komodo Edit, Windows does include its own text editor. It's called Notepad. Notepad's very powerful in that you can edit pretty much any file, but it's not really geared towards coding. So you're going to have to do a lot of manual typing yourself. But again, you can do that. And that's actually how I learned myself back in the day. So. But again, Komodo Edit 9, it's free, it's cross-platform, and if you download this, you'll be able to follow along with me fairly easily. One of the things that I dislike when I watch video tutorials online is that typically the person who is doing the video will have some sort of application or has some version of an application that you can no longer get, or that you don't actually want to pay for because it's like super expensive. So I wanted to use a tool that was freely available to anyone to use. Like I said, it's cross-platform, and it's free, so you should have absolutely no excuse not to download it. So just head on over to Google, Google Komodo Edit 9, and you should be able to download it just fine. So if you're following along and you have Komodo Edit 9, the very first thing I'm going to do is create a brand new project. Now we could just jump in and start working on an HTML file, but what I'm going to do is create a project that I'm going to use throughout all of these tutorial videos that I plan on recording. So I'm going to say new project here, and I'm actually going to put this on my desktop. I'm going to create a new folder called video tutorial, create that, and I'm going to rename my project from my project to video tutorial, and I'm going to hit save. So you'll notice over here on the left side of Komodo Edit, it has my project over here. And the next thing we need to do is create a file. So we're going to create an HTML web page. So what we need to do is create an actual HTML page. So I'm going to hit new file. And when I do that, you'll notice that the file name is text-1.txt. Well, what we need to do is rename this file. So I'm going to do save as, and I'm going to call this index.html. Now typically the main page or the home page of a website has the name of index. And in our instance here, because we're just creating an index, or excuse me, just because we're creating an HTML page, we're going to give it the file extension of .html. Now, sometimes when you are on different websites, you'll see that some pages have a .html, some have a .htm, some have a .aspx file extension. It really all depends on the technology that the website or company is using for displaying and creating their website. In our instance here in this tutorial, we're just going to create a very basic HTML website So we're going to start off by creating a .html web page. So I'm going to hit save, and you'll notice that the file got renamed as index.html. Now, the very first thing we need to do here in our page, once we get here and have renamed it, is we need to tell the web browser what sort of document this is. And we do that using the Doctype Declaration. So you do that by doing the opening bracket here. And if you're not familiar with where the brackets are at, they're next to the M, to the right side of the M on the keyboard. And this is going to be bracket, exclamation point, and we're going to type in Doctype and space, and we're going to type in HTML, and then closing bracket. And essentially all this does is once the browser reads this page, or we load this page in the browser, it reads this line, it's like, oh, everything I'm going to see below is going to be an HTML page, because that's what we're defining right here. The document type itself is HTML. Now, the version of HTML that we're using is HTML5, and we know that because this is the HTML5 Doctype Declaration. That's the format for it. So anything that we're going to be doing in these tutorials and going forward is going to be written in HTML5, which is the latest or most current version of HTML. So now that we have the doctype defined, I'm going to hit enter here, and I'm going to type in HTML. And I'm going to close it here. Now, one of the great things about Komodo edit that you wouldn't get with like a text edit or a text Wrangler or a notepad on Windows is that when I close this, you'll notice that we get the closing tag. So let me go ahead and delete that again and just show you really quick. So we want the HTML tag, and I'm going to close this, and you'll notice that we also get the closing HTML tag right here. Typically, if you're using some sort of text editor that is not made for coding HTML, you would not get this closing tag. You'd have to manually type it out yourself. So again, if you're following along and you're using Komodo edit, it should be doing that all for you. So we've got our doc type here, and that's going to tell the browser what sort of document this is. So again, an HTML5 document. And then we have our HTML tag here, which says everything that's inside of here is going to be some sort of HTML markup. And this is how you start and how you end an HTML document. So if I go ahead and save this right now, we could actually preview this in the browser. We can do that by clicking on the little globe here. And if we did that, it would open a preview pane down here at the bottom. But I actually want to launch this inside of Firefox. So I'm going to click on the little drop-down arrow there and click on Firefox. And this is asking me which file I want to preview. Yes, I want to preview the index file. So I'm going to click on preview. It's going to open Firefox here, and you'll see absolutely nothing, which is to be expected because we actually don't have anything in our HTML page here yet. So let's go back to our editor here. So inside the HTML tag, if I do the opening bracket again here, you'll immediately see that we have two options. We have a body tag or we have a head tag. Now these are listed in alphabetical order here. These aren't necessarily listed in the order that they should appear within the HTML document. So the very first thing we want in the HTML is the head tag. So I'm going to close that, and you'll notice, again, we get the closing head tag itself. So I'll hit enter again. Now inside the head tag, we can define things like metadata. So we can define things like the description of the web page. We can define things like keywords. We can define the document author. We can even define the title for the page itself. So let's go ahead and actually define the title for the page here. So we're going to do opening bracket, and we're going to type title. You'll notice that's one of the options here. And we're going to close that. And then we have the opening title and the closing title tag. Now the title for the web page needs to appear between the opening and the closing title tag here. So we are going to give it a title of Hello World. Why Hello World? Well, typically within the industry, whenever you're trying to learn some new type of programming language, or you're just kind of messing around with something like HTML here, the very first application you create, it's typically called Hello World. Why Hello World? Because it really kind of shows you, some of the basics of the programming language itself. It shows you like input, output, slight interaction, things like that. So we're going to give our web page here the title of Hello World. Now, if we save this and we go back to our browser here and we refresh, you'll notice up here in the tab, we actually have the title that we just defined, Hello World. So we actually have something in the browser now that we actually defined within our web page here. Now, if we want to do something like our meta information, we could say opening. So again, we got the opening bracket there. We'll type in meta, and we could do something like name equals, and let's go ahead and type in description. And then we are going to say content equals, and this is where we give a description of our web page. So we can say this is our very first web page. And then I'm going to close that. Now, unlike the title or the head or the HTML tag, you'll notice that the meta tag does not have a closing /meta. It's actually just meta and then the closing angle bracket. So we'll type in another meta tag here and we'll say name equals, we'll do keywords this time. And we'll say content equals, and these are like keywords to describe our web page. So we could say first, we can say HTML, we could say hello world. And this is just a comma separated list of different keywords that help to explain the content within our page. And I'll close that. And we could stick in one more meta tag here. We could say meta name equals, and we could say author, and we could say content equals, and then here's where we could type our name. So I'm going to go ahead and type in Jesse, and now we have the meta information filled out for our web page. So if we go ahead and save this and I go back to my page and refresh, again, you're not going to see anything within the content or the body of the page because we haven't defined the body yet in the page. But you still will see the title up here. Well, where's your meta description and your meta keywords and the meta author? We don't actually see that within the page itself. That is information that a search engine such as Google would pick up on as it's indexing your page. This really all comes into search engine optimization. And if you can get this to work really great so that Google or other search engines, but come on, really, it's really just Google, will pick up on it. That will help you get ranked high on the list of results when it comes to Googling something. So there's people that, their sole job is search engine optimization, and it's working with a lot of this stuff and then working with the content on the page so that when Google crawls it will show up and rank high. So there's a science to all this, but generally speaking, this is the type of information that would go inside the head. And something else that would go inside the head that we'll talk about in the future or in a future tutorial is CSS. And what I just typed right there, this is a comment. So you type an HTML comment by doing angle bracket, exclamation point, dash dash, and then you type in whatever the comment is. So CSS will go here in the future. And I don't know why I switched caps, but I did. So, and then to close the comment, we do dash dash angle bracket. And that's just essentially saying that in the future, I'm going to put CSS in this section. So, but for now, we're not going to worry about it. I'll save it. If I go back to my browser here, you won't see it. HTML comments never render within the browser. You'll never see them inside the browser unless you actually view the source of the page. And that's what this is right here. That's the source for the page. So, okay, so we've essentially defined our head here. The next thing we need to define is the body. And the body is where all of our content is going to go. So I'm going to type in body here and close out the body tag. And now we can actually start filling out content. So anything we put inside the body is actually going to show up and render inside the browser here when we view it. So since we're working in HTML5, HTML5 has a tag known as the header tag. Not to be confused with the head tag that's up here, but this is the header. And this is essentially the top of your web page. So things that you typically define within here could be something like a heading. It could be your navigation, if you have navigation at the top of your website, or things, things like that, a search box perhaps, things of that nature. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a heading inside here, and you do a heading using the H tag. If I just type in H, you'll see that we have an H1, we have an H2, an H3, an H4, an H5, and an H6. The higher the number, the smaller, at least by default, the heading will be. So we want to do an H1, so it's a really big heading. And we're going to say, hello world again. So let's go ahead and save this and go back to my page here and refresh. And you'll notice that we now have the heading, hello world, displaying in our web browser. So that is the header. And let's go ahead and define a section. And a section is, well, just like it says, a section within the page. A header is also a section, but it's got it's got its own name for that, called header. There's also one for the footer, which I'll add here really quick. It's called footer. Back in the day, I say back in the day, not that long ago, it would have been something along the lines of this. So div class equals header. Oops. Div class equals header. But now HTML5 actually has a tag or an element called header, so we don't need to do that. Let's see, down here in the footer, let's go with an H6. And I'll say copyright Jesse 2015. So now if I save this again and we refresh, you'll see that I have my header here. Again, that's in the H1. The H1 is the largest heading tag. And down here in the footer, we have copyright Jesse 2015. And again, I stuck that inside the H6 tag, or the smallest of the heading tags. And then inside the section here, this is what we're going to use as essentially I don't want to say body of the document, because we've got the HTML element here called body. But this is really the meat of the page. This is where we're going to put our content. So let's say we want to create a paragraph of text. So in order to create a paragraph, we could do opening bracket, and I could type P, close it, and now we have a paragraph. So I could say this is a paragraph of text on my first web page. Oops, web page. So now if I save this and I refresh my browser again, you'll notice that this is a paragraph of text on my first web page. Let's say we wanted to have another paragraph of text. Well, we could define another paragraph, and I could say this is yet, if I could spell, yet another paragraph of text on my first web page. So if you're familiar with paragraphs in something like, say, Microsoft Word, you usually define a new paragraph by hitting the enter button, and that will take you down to a brand new paragraph, meaning there's going to be a gap between the previous paragraph and the one you're just starting. So we should get something similar in our HTML page here. So here's our first paragraph, and if I refresh, we should get a second paragraph with a space between it. Oops, I have to save my page here. And if we refresh, you'll notice first paragraph, space, second paragraph. So that's exactly what we wanted. Let's say we want to have something stand out in our list of text here, or in our paragraphs of text here. Let's say we want the another to stand out. You know, we want to make that bold, for example. So in HTML, you can make something bold by using the strong tag. So I'm going to type in strong before the word another, and then I'm going to close out strong right there. And if we save this and I refresh, you'll see that the word another is now bolded. And I simply did that using the strong tag. Now, I should mention this right away, or at this point in time, I guess I should say. When it comes to HTML, you're really just defining your content. You're marking up the content. You're laying out the content, and then you're wrapping it inside these HTML tags. You really don't want to define any sort of style or, you know, express how it looks using HTML. So while the strong tag is essentially doing that, the strong tag is essentially doing that, you primarily want to stay away from doing any sort of styling inside the HTML. That's where CSS comes into play. And again, that's something we're going to talk about in the future. But using the strong tag, generally speaking, it's okay. But you really don't want to go down the line of adding a bunch of styles or trying to style your content inside the markup itself. It's really something you want to save for CSS. And again, we'll touch on that in a future video tutorial. But yeah, this is essentially our website here. Let's say we want to have another section. And let's say we wanted to create something like a list, for example, a bulleted list. So how would we create a bulleted list? Well, a bulleted list in HTML is called an unordered list, meaning it's not numbered, it's just bulleted. So we do that with a UL tag. The UL stands for unordered list. So we'll type in UL there, and I'll hit enter, go to the next line. And then we want to define a list item, or one of the bullets in the list. So to define a list item, we do opening tag, li, and then here's where we get to type our first list item. So I'll say this is the first item in the list. And if I wanted to do another list item, I could say this is another item in the list. And let's add one more, and I'll say this is the last item in the list. And if I save that and I refresh, you'll see that we now have this bulleted list inside of our content. And that's exactly what we wanted. So we have a heading that says hello world. We have two paragraphs of text here, one of which has this bold word inside of it. We have this unordered list, and we have our footer, which is holding our copyright information. So let's add one other thing that actually makes web pages useful, and that is a link. So let's create one more section, and let's go ahead and add a link now. So we added a link using the anchor tag, and an anchor is opening bracket A, and then what we do is hit space. You need to define a property of the anchor tag. A property is something that, this element has. So for example, a property of a car is like a tire, right? All cars have tires. Or the windshield, because all cars have a windshield. Another property of a car would be like the paint. What color is the paint of the car? Something like that. So in this example, we're defining the anchor tag, and one of its properties is the href. And the href is the link that you actually want to go to, or the page that you actually want to link to. So for example, let's say I want to link to Google. So I'll type in http://www.google.com, and then I'll close my bracket there. And then you'll notice that we have this closing anchor tag. Now, if I was to save this right now, and we go back to our browser and refresh, you'll notice that we do not have an anchor tag here, or a link here. Why don't we have the link? Well, because we haven't actually defined what we want to click on yet. So while we have the link there, we don't have anything between the opening and the closing anchor tag. So what we want to do is say, this is a link to Google. And I'm going to save this. And if we refresh, now you'll notice we have the link. And it says, this is a link to Google. So if I go ahead and click on that, you'll notice that we are now on the Google homepage. And if I hit back, it'll take us back to our web page here. But you'll notice that if I click on this, it's going to take me in the same tab to Google. What if I want to have it open a brand new tab? I can do that by using another property inside the anchor, and that is target equals underscore blank. And I'll save that. And if I refresh my browser, you'll notice that we're in one tab here. And if I click on this link, you'll notice that it opens a brand new tab. So we don't lose our first tab. We can go right back to our web page. But we also have a second tab here that we can navigate between tabs here, which is really nice when it comes to links. So typically, if you are adding a link for another page within your own website, you would not use the target property. If you want to link to an external site, then you would generally use the target property so that it opens a brand new tab or opens a brand new window so that whoever it was that clicked on the link is not losing their original or the original website that they were on. So for example, if I'm on Hello World here, let me close this. If I'm on Hello World here and I wanted to open a link to Google, I'll do that. You know, I can now Google around. So what is HTML, for example? I can look up what is HTML. But hey, I can always go back to the page that I was on or the website that I was on without losing that information. Whereas if you were not using the target property, that page is lost. You got to hit the back button, navigate back to it. It's like, well, how many pages did I go forward? I got to hit that many pages backwards. If you use the target underscore blank property and value, you'll always have your web page in one of the tabs, and then whatever link you're clicking on will open in a brand new tab. So that, I think, is it for my first initial tutorial here on creating your very first web page. So I would go out and if you've been following along, create your page, and I would keep experimenting with various HTML tags and just kind of play around with them and see what you can get to actually display in your browser. I've been doing this or working with HTML since about 1998, and I was in high school at the time, and no one really taught me. I just kind of learned on my own, and I did that by viewing different web pages and then viewing their web page source. So let me go ahead and show you really quick on how to do that before we end this tutorial. So again, this is our web page, and we're defining this inside of the Komodo Edit 9 text editor. But if we open up our browser here and we navigate to our page, we could also view the source here. And we do that a couple of different ways, but the primary way that I do it is I right click on the page itself and I say view page source. And that's going to open up the source of the document. And that's going to show you, what tags we're using here in the website. If we were using CSS, what CSS we were linking to, or what JavaScript we're linking to. And you can see, all the properties that we're using on various tags and things like that. And if we compare this, let me minimize this real quick. If we compare this with Komodo Edit, you'll see that it is exactly the same. So you don't need the original file for a web page in order to learn how it's built. You can just navigate to it, right click, view source, and you can see exactly how the web page is built. So if you're curious as to how someone's doing something on a website, I would strongly recommend navigating to the page, viewing the source for the page, and kind of learning about how it's structured, how it's laid out, and what sort of tags or properties that they're using, because that'll help you understand how the different tags relate, and then how they're coming together to build the web page that you are actually viewing within your browser. So thank you for checking out my first tutorial. Stay tuned for the next one, and we'll continue on here with building our first web page and then eventually moving into our very first website.